Welcome back to the India Development Debate. Now, we've penciled in the dates, February 24th and 25th on our calendars. The all-important state visit of the President of the United States, Donald Trump, to India. It's time to say Kem Chho Trump, because this two-day visit takes him to New Delhi as well as Gujarat. And that is of particular importance to Trump ahead of the presidential elections later this year, to perhaps try and woo the Indian voting diaspora in the United States. And we've seen how Howdy Modi has played out in Houston, Texas last year. A turnout of 50,000 people there. But yes, there is going to be business on this Trump visit. What are the chances that the missing trade deal between India and the US will come out of this Trump visit? There's a lot at stake. Energy is a prime import for India. Indian airlines also need those Boeing aircraft to be delivered. The biggest chunk of the action, of course, could be in the defense and technology space. But let's discuss the prospects of all of this with our panel of guests. Neelam Deo has served as India's ambassador to Denmark and to the Ivory Coast. And through her career, she has served as part of the diplomatic corps, both in Washington as well as New York. She was involved in investment promotion activity there. And now she's director of Gateway House, the Indian Council on Global Relations. Also joining us is Mukesh Aghi. He's president and CEO of the US-India Strategic Partnership Forum. And of course, our dear friend Maroof Raza, an expert on strategic affairs. He joins us on India Development Debate as well. A very warm welcome to all of you. First to you, ma'am, to Neelam Deo. What is the possibility, ma'am, of a trade deal being struck this time on this visit? While both sides, they would be hankering for an equitable deal when it comes to market access, which side are the scales likely to tilt? Yes, Modi and Trump, they appear to have a good equation on the face of it, but Trump has always been rather unhappy about India's high duties. He's called India the tariff king, especially when it came to those high duties on Harley-Davidson motorcycles, as I remember correctly. And we know he's a hard bargainer as well. He's coming out of a phase one deal with China, rather beneficial to the US, for which he gives himself a whole lot of credit. So, ma'am, how much is he likely to push on tariff cuts by India in what could be a potential trade deal?
I would expect actually a hard push. President Trump values trade questions more than their actual worth in dollars and cents. So while there is a small trade deficit with India, the United States, President Trump has always been very harsh in the way he formulates his demands. There have been statements coming out of the US recently that India will not be treated as a developing country and therefore cannot try and reclaim the GSP benefits. I think there will clearly be pressure on lowering the tariffs that have been raised on medical devices, stents, etc. There will be a push for India to remove the increase in tariffs on agricultural imports from the United States. I think all round we should expect that India will be forced into making some compromises. I do want to say that this is not really a trade deal. We are not talking about a big range of commodities and services. We're actually talking about quite small things. So it might be better to call it a trade agreement.
Trade agreement, perhaps. Mukesh Aghi, what's your view on this? We know that the bilateral trade between India and the US is tilting in favor of the US. It's led by India's energy imports in recent times, imports like gas and LNG and high-quality coal. India is bringing in much more of all of this from the US now, and the size of trade has been going up in favor of the Americans, and that number will probably climb further. It's going to be advantage US when those Boeing aircraft are delivered to the likes of SpiceJet in India going ahead. So in contrast, of course, India is exporting small ticket items, which is perhaps why ma'am is saying that we're looking at perhaps a trade agreement. We export items like leather and garments. Of course, there's jewelry too, but that is limited. In this scenario, you have the US cancelling India's Generalized System of Preference, GSP status. The US says India cannot be listed as a developing country anymore. They're citing the fact that India is a member of the G20 and that India's share in world trade is above 0.5%. So the question to you, Mr. Aghi, is that when trade momentum is currently favoring the United States, when India has taken off the GSP, A, what are the immediate downsides to India? And B, in this kind of scenario, what is the kind of trade agreement, if you will, that one can expect New Delhi to crack with Trump?
Well, I think trade is important. If you look at the trade between India and US has gone up from 142 billion to 160. So the momentum is moving the right direction. I think the US companies, US is saying give us access and level playing field. They're not saying give us any extra benefits, but just give us level playing field. And that's important. So you treat US companies as equal partners, just like any Indian company itself. But more important is you have to understand that while the trade deficit momentum is going in favor of the US, coming from $28 billion trade surplus India has against US down below 20, and I believe in the next 3 to 4 years, it'll come to even level itself. So I think one thing is momentum is moving the right direction. Will there be a trade deal? I think I agree there will be some kind of a partial trade deal, which is going to benefit both Indian companies and the US companies. Are they demanding something which is unreasonable? I don't think so. But more important, you have to understand that GSP restoration is not a big deal. When US pulled off GSP restoration or GSP from India, that all those goods in that category have gone up to export by almost 5%. So I think the message to the US is, while GSP restoration is important, it's not critical. We will work with you to find the right solution and move forward.
Let me take that across again to Neelam there, because, the average duty concession, ma'am, that accrued to India because it was on the GSP in 2018, that amounted to almost 240 billion US dollars, which is quite substantial if you look at the size of the Indo-US trade as it stands today. In fact, from the numbers that I have, $6.3 billion worth of Indian goods use the GSP route to enter the US market. Now, since that duty concession is going to be history because India is off the GSP, the damage to India could be quite severe, and we can ill afford this in times of an economic slowdown. So what could come in handy is if Trump, and that's a big if again, if Trump revokes that cancellation. Do you think that could happen? Because India is, of course, going to roll out the red carpet. Modi is going to charm him, but will he charm him enough to do so? What do you think?
I think with Trump, most countries that he visits, everybody is concerned that there shouldn't be unpleasant shocks. It's usually a damage control exercise. In fact, as you know, the G7 countries, when they meet, the last time they didn't even try and issue a joint statement. I think we should try and use GSP as a bargaining chip. I am not aware of many situations in which Trump has rolled back on positions he has taken, except with China, where we are talking about hundreds of billions of dollars. Actually, the $6 billion that you speak about is a fairly big figure. It concerns all the small producers, and certainly it will be beneficial if it can be removed. But you also have to remember that actually Indo-US trade, if you include services, is well over $100 billion. So maybe we should also not be looking for small potatoes, as Americans say all the time. We should be looking for something bigger, and we should bargain not only within trade, but also for strategic benefit.
So if that small potato has to become large, and that could potentially happen in the defense field, Maroof, one of the key outcomes of this visit is the possibility of a deal for an integrated air defense weapons system that India wants to buy from the US. And that is worth a big price tag. It comes with $1.86 billion worth of a price tag. This is what is also known as the National Advanced Surface-to-Air Missile System 2. And if you can tell us about the significance that this system has to India, especially in light of this price tag that it comes with. I know the Indian side would like to see that price lower than $1 billion US dollars, but I don't know if that is likely to happen.
Well, it's not just the integrated air defense system that the Americans are looking to sell to India. It's been predicted that in all likelihood, the defense deals with Mr. Trump's visit would be in the range of 7 billion upwards. And it's not just 1.86 billion for the air defense system, which I'll just explain to you, but also for the Guardian drones. This was something, if you remember, in an earlier visit of Mr. Modi to the US, this was brought up. And this is crucial for India extending its reach in the Indian Ocean region. because these drones not only provide you reconnaissance abilities, but they have pods on which you can arm missiles and therefore extend your ability to reach out to your targets well beyond where your ships and aircrafts can easily go.
Sure.
And in addition to that, there is a very strong possibility of naval helicopters being bought,
Right.
which is, I think, about $2.8 billion worth we are talking about, 24 helicopters. So the focus of the bulk military purchases this time, other than air defense system, would be to enhance maritime offensive and defensive capabilities, keeping in mind America's obsession of using India as a pivot in the Indian Ocean to counter China's ambitions. We've previously done a number of defense deals with the Americans. America today stands to be India's probably largest defense supplier in terms of more recent deals. Of course, the entire inventory of India's armed forces is more still leaning towards Russian origin weapon systems. And this is what brings me to the point that you had raised, that considering the S-400 Triumph deal, which we have done with the Russians, how is this anything different?
Correct.
Well, the Triumphs are basically air defense, missile systems, and they can counter whatever the enemy may throw towards you. The Russians claim it is the best in the world. And for us, it is also very price friendly compared to what the Americans were trying to push into India, the THAAD/the Patriot systems.
Sure.
But the other aspect to understand is that our entire air defense inventory is pretty outdated.
Right.
And today
we
we
really
heard
need
the
this.
CDS General Rawat say at the Times conference that, you see, one of the
Yes.
well, of course.
Yes,
If you don't
absolutely.
need
So
this,
whether you talk about
believe
the
me,
defense
in a worst
system,
case
whether you talk
scenario,
about naval
you can
guns.
say goodbye to a lot of your cities.
No, absolutely. Whether we talk about Apache and Chinook helicopters, all of these are right up there on the government's wish list. But with the kind of reserves that the government is sitting on, the budgetary allocations as you see them right now, it's okay to have this wish list, but can the government afford to get them at this stage from the US?
Well, it's a good question, but the point to understand is that the armed forces can keep asking for the stars, but we can only buy within what is the allocated budget. I think we're all familiar that the defense budget of the country has been falling dramatically. We are now to about 1.5% of the GDP, when an earlier parliamentary committee on defense had said that India can actually look at spending up to 3% of its GDP on defense. So we're spending actually half of that. So within half of that, you have to get a few systems which are force multipliers, which is top-end stuff. And then you have to get, the workhorses.
Sure.
And then you have to get a few systems, which is about 20% of your entire inventory in any weapon platform, which will be locally made, so that you have capability to respond at every level of spectrum of a threat that is thrown up at you. And most importantly, please understand, I would ask you a counter question. Since you are in good health, would you like to abandon all your insurance policies?
Definitely not.
Yeah, so it's for the same reason that you need to keep investing, because when a worst case scenario arrives, as it did in Kargil, you cannot be running around and looking for any friend to help you out. And General Malik made a very profound remark then, we don't have much, but we'll fight with what we have.
True that. Mukesh Aghi, what about exports of Indian services to the US, especially in IT? The issue of H-1B visas has been problematic to say the least, but now that the US economy is looking robust, they need Indian IT manpower resources. Do you expect that issue to get ironed out?
I don't think so. I think the demand for Indian IT services continues. You look at Indian top 3 players, they're growing in double digit in the US market. And more important is today we have a shortage of almost 1 million software engineers in the United States. So the wage escalation is going up. And I think the requirement for Indian IT services to provide more high-end services demand is going up. Will the H-1B visa issue going to be discussed? I think it will be, but you have to understand this is an election year. Immigration is a big issue. I don't think we'll have a resolution this year, at least on H-1B itself.
In fact, let me take that across to Neelam Deo again. The majority of the Indian American community in the US has not been a great supporter of the Trump administration even before he got elected, and that largely pro-Democrat and anti-Republican sentiment among the community hasn't quite changed since Trump has come into power. In fact, he probably made it worse with his anti-immigration stance as well. So what can Trump hope to accomplish with this Kem Chho Trump initiative on this visit ahead of the US presidential elections later this year? What's your reading of that?
So, I think we have to divide the Indian origin American community into two. One is the majority which votes, I understand, about 70% Democratic. The other is about 30%, which not all of which votes Republican, but which consists of the rich people. Right. And so in an election, you look for both money and votes. And as you get further and further into electoral cycles, money determines votes. So maybe he won't get the majority of the Indian origin community voting for this president, but that will not stop him and his campaign managers not to look for money from wealthy Indian donors.
And on the flip side, Maruf, how can the Prime Minister use this US visit to his advantage? He faces a good amount of flack from portions of the international community on the Citizenship Amendment Act. Do you think that this cozying up, if you will, with Trump is going to help his cause?
Yeah, it's another good question, and it's actually happening at a time when the government could do with a very clear US support in a number of foreign policy areas. India's diplomatic community has worked hard to build consensus towards the Indian position, and I'm not talking of just the CAA bill, but also post-August 5 and the events in Kashmir. Now, a lot of that still has criticism abroad and in India. And even Mr. Trump has made, to my understanding, at least 7 references recently in which he's wanted to mediate on the Kashmir issue because they want to keep Pakistan humored so Pakistan can give them a half-decent exit from Afghanistan, where the Americans have been there for nearly 2 decades and have hardly got anything to boast about. So Ms. Modi can extract mileage from him on that score that, we are expecting more clear American position in support of whatever we have been saying is the Indian internal matter of Kashmir. But more importantly, there is a need for a greater clarity to come out from Washington, and it should not be linked to only defense deals and trade deals, but greater clarity to come out with Washington that where they want to go now with India in the foundation defense agreements, which is clearly what the Americans had been pushing for, to ensure that India stands in as their most important pivot in Asia and in the Indian Ocean.
Right.
What is it? We'd expect Trump to articulate that and also come out very clearly in saying that a terrorist is a terrorist and those who sponsor terrorists are also terrorists, period, which means Pakistan. I don't think this kind of waffle should be bought by India any longer.
Fair enough. That's a fair point. Mukesh Aghi, I'll let you have the last word on the ease of doing business in India. I'm wondering if the needle has indeed moved. How do you see that reflecting on American investments in India as of now? Because that should be a key point that would come up as far as Indo-US ties go, with the electorate watching, as far as the American stance towards India is concerned, and how a robust economy is looking at an economy that is currently slowing down.
Well, I think the American interest in India continues, especially from an investment perspective. When you look at the latest FDI numbers, they're up by 10% in a slowdown economy. So I think there's absolutely no doubt the US companies are keen to invest, expand, and create jobs in India. That's important. I think on the issue of ease of doing business, while we are seeing a dramatic improvement on the World Bank ranking, I think those rankings are based on Mumbai and New Delhi. But when you go into regions, other states itself, each state is different itself. While there is improvement, there's a lot of room to improve much more further itself. So I think from a US company's perspective, the interest continues, they're keen to invest more, and they're working both with the state level and the central government itself to see how they can become more efficient, effective, and provide value proposition to the customer base. So in closing, I would say that the interest is very strong. There's absolutely no iota of slowdown from US companies trying to invest in India itself.
From an economic, business, strategic, political perspective, this two-day visit of the US President to India is going to be very keenly watched. And of course, we'll keep you updated and get you more reactions. But for the moment, let me thank a panel of guests, Mukesh Aghi, Maruf Raza and Neelam Dev. Thanks very much indeed for joining us with your perspective on India Development Debate tonight.